Hello everybody and welcome back to our Unreal Engine 4 and Playfab series. Now in this episode I was reminded by one of the comments in the last episode that I have not actually done a leaderboards and statistics episode. I did have this planned originally and I actually recorded some of the segments for it. However, I had to change things out because of some other issues, and I think somewhere along the line the files have disappeared and I don't actually have them anymore. Plus as well, it was quite a while ago, so some other stuff will have changed. So I've decided just to make another one, and I know it's something you guys want, so we're going to go through it today. So, statistics and leaderboards. Now, statistics are the way that the leaderboards are done. And what I mean by this is statistics are different to data, like the player data, because statistics can only be a number value. But also statistics, you can't just set the data because it's only a number. It works in like a unique way because the number can only be set to be like the sum of what's happening, or the minimum, the maximum, or like the new value. And because of this, the way that you handle it, you need to make sure that you set it up as the right one before you start doing the calls, and design what you're going to use the statistic for before you start using it, because of the way that you're going to need to set it. Now what I mean by this is you can't do the same like with player data where you can just jump in and set random things. It needs to be set up properly beforehand because it will get the statistic before it sets it, which means that you need to actually make sure that you use the default value. So like, in one of our previous episodes we've discussed setting up automation to set up default statistics if need be for users. Now, this is slightly different to player data, because with player data you need to make sure that you set it up by setting these defaults, whereas in order to set a default statistic you need to first create a leaderboard. So I've used this one just as an example. It's called test wins. Now, unfortunately, when you set one of these at the moment, you can't actually you can't delete the leaderboard once you've created one, so make sure you name it properly. I think this is something Playfab is going to work on. However, it can cause issues if you delete leaderboards if they're still in use. It could cause a lot of chaos. So I think at the moment I'm actually planning to leave it as it is. So when you create a new leaderboard, all you need to do is give it the name of what you're going to call it, what reset frequency it is. Now, if you were going to hold something, say like a leaderboard that happened as part of a competition in your game and it happens monthly, then you can have the leaderboard automatically update rather than reset rather than having to come in and do it manually every single time. What I mean by reset is when a leaderboard resets, it will reset everybody back to basically zero unless you tell it to give it like a default value. So this can be quite handy if you want to keep track of number of games won or something. You have a leaderboard to display to people who has the most wins. Now, as well, in leaderboards you can do some pretty cool things in regards to prizes, which we'll get onto in a second, but I just want to finish off how to set up the leaderboard. And then this aggregation method at the bottom is what I was explaining before on how the statistic is actually updated, or rather the leaderboard value, which is the statistic. So you only have 4 options. You have last, so it always updates with the new value that you're passing through, either through Cloud Script or the API call. The minimum and maximum, obviously pretty self-explanatory there. And the sum, so these are the previous value of the statistic added to the value that you're passing through. So once you've set up these, you can just create it, and then whenever you come in you'll get something like this. Now you can see here on ours, when I was originally recording these episodes, I actually did show that I set the statistic of my player to 20, but this leaderboard here will show you all of your players. It only shows, I think it's 100 by default, and then at the bottom there'll be like load more, so you can load in more and more of them. But it will show the top 100 players for this leaderboard, each with their rank by the side and what the current value of whatever your leaderboard is representing. And it will also have reset history here, so when you reset it, so if we reset now, you can see that you have the last time when it started and when it ended. Obviously this will update to be similar to this once once it gets further down the line. But yeah, so you can see that when an leaderboard has updated, and you'll know what version of the leaderboard you're currently on. This is more handy if it's something that's going to be constant, and you need to constantly be checking it or constantly updating it, like every month or something, in order to make sure that they're on the correct leaderboard. You can edit leaderboards, but what it means by this is you can only change the reset frequency and the aggregation method. You can't change the statistic name, which is why I said that you need to make sure that you get it right the first time, or use something that's a bit more generic rather than very specific, because obviously you're not going to be able to change the statistic name, which means that no matter what, you'll always have to call this for the players through CloudScript or API in order to update it. Now, statistics are, again, slightly different to player data, because player data, if you go into your players and have a look at player data, you actually have to set it up. Whereas with statistics, if I go in, there is nothing there by default. So in order to make sure that the player has something, you again need to make sure that you probably have some sort of default load script, like similar to one that we had in our automation episode a couple of weeks ago, where you set up a default on player add title, or the first time the player logs in, so that then things are set up so whenever you do things like this, it actually works, because otherwise you're going to try and set a statistic that doesn't even exist, and then obviously it's going to cause some problems, pretty much, because it'll go, well, there's no statistic under that name. Now, you can just hook it up to, the set defaults one. You could just create one. So in order to just set up a very basic statistic, we're just going to do the following. You can simply just add in a variable called request for the statistic, and then this request would just simply be the normal things that we come across. So the Playfab ID being the current player ID as normal. Statistic being the data that you're going to pass through to the actual player statistic values. Now, this has two arguments. This is again in the form of an array, so you could probably update multiple at the same time if you needed to. Again, this will help with reducing API calls, which you want to keep down to as minimal as possible. But what you need here is the statistic name, and then this will be you can either put in a string value here, or you can you could pass in an argument through the set defaults to, not so much for the default. This is more for if you're getting or setting something dynamically, then you probably want to pass through the value, the value of the statistic that you're changing. Whereas seeing as this is the default one, we're just gonna set up the one that we've already got, which was test wins, and then it also needs the value that this is now going to be. I'm just going to put 0 as the default, just simply because 0 most of the time will be the default. Obviously, you guys might want something a little bit more like, I don't know, if it's based on MMR or something, you want to start off at not at 0, you want to start off at like 5,000, like in a middle point sort of thing. It all depends on what you need. And then underneath this, we just simply need to do server update player statistics, and then all we're going to do inside of here is just put our request in. So what this will do is just call the server update player statistics and update it with the stuff that we have passed through, so the statistic name and the value that we're going to pass through. So I'm just going to deploy this so that we have it to use later down the line when we need to. But again, once it's done, it will show up for all players rather than having to go through and add it to each individual player. And then as well, if it doesn't exist, I believe it creates a leaderboard. However, I probably I'd create the leaderboard first to make sure that you have the statistic that you actually need, and then give it to the player. This is just simple stuff. It's setting up something before you start referencing it, basically. Now, with leaderboards as well, when it comes to the end, the reset point basically of your leaderboard, when you call that through the API, you will basically go, okay, the leaderboard has finished. It will pass through a giant JSON of the results. So, who came top 100, who came da 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 da, so on and so forth, and their ID and their values. And then what you can do from that is go, okay, if I want to set up a reward system for the player depending on where they came from, or like where they finished in that leaderboard, this is how you do it. So you could do test prize leaderboard, something like that. You can put in a description. This is again more for you though. You select the leaderboard or statistic as what you want to track, and in here you have the table contents. So you can see here it automatically updates exactly what the last inclusive was, and then adds a generic value to it to round up basically to the nearest 10. So it's around about 10 out of 10 each time that you can do. Obviously, if you start changing them whilst in here, like so, it won't update these. So if I was you, I'd probably make sure that you've got sort of the one that you need first before you start to hash this out. But I'll just show you the basics. So rank 1 to 10, you could put in top prize, something like that, just a description to know what it is. And then again, you have the different types. This is very similar to the tasks and automation side of things. That you can do a send push notification. If it's a mobile game, you probably want to tell players, hey, the leaderboard has reset and congratulations, you finished in the top X amount of people, sort of thing. You can increase player statistics, so you could always have like you could do it 1-to-1, and the top player gets like a special statistic that says like top of the game, best player, whatever, and have something like that. And then obviously you could then read that statistic in order to show things off in the game. Like you could give them like a little crown next to their name in like player screens or whatever. You can have increment, so you can grant virtual currencies and grant items to player. These are probably the more common ones that you'll see within games. So whenever they reach the top X amount, they'll get like a chest, and in that chest there'll be certain things. So obviously that would be through an item. You would select the item, say like the bundle, and give them one, and then it'll basically give them that bundle. You could just give them virtual currency if you wanted to, so you could always just give them like an absolute ton of virtual currency. You can also add in multiple, so you can give virtual currency and item. This is probably be better if you don't want to create specific bundles for ranks. So like maybe if it's like a one-off thing, this is probably better. If you have something every single month that's going to reset, and whoever gets the top like 100 is going to get a very specific thing, then you probably want to set up a bundle that'll have everything in it, and then just grant them the item of the bundle rather than breaking it down every single time into exactly what it is. You can also, I don't know why you can do this, but for some reason you can delete and ban the players depending on where they finish. Don't do this. Please don't do this. Don't ban or delete a player if they finish in the top like 100. Please don't do this. You'll get some very angry people. Banning a player is at least not the worst of them. They're banned, but you can undo that. If you delete the player, it will lose all of their data, including anything they have bought. This is a no. Big no. And the others as well are, again, the Cloud Script and the Azure function. If you've hooked up some Azure functions, and this might be where you want to do it, Cloud Script, you could always contain all of this inside of a Cloud Script in order to make sure that it's run more on the server side. Plus, as well, you'll actually have data come back through Playfab into the data side of things here on the dashboards and data in order to see that the Cloud Script has been executed and what the results were and all that sort of stuff. So it might be better to do that type of thing if you want to track it a little bit better. Of course, this will still, be given to people, and stuff like that will still happen, and it will still be tracked a little bit better. But Cloud Script, sometimes you have a little bit more control over what happens with it. So that is another way that you could go down. Obviously, as well, you probably, if it's depending on the platform of the game, you probably want to do multiple things anyway. So sending push notifications for a mobile game whenever a leaderboard resets is probably like a must. You'd probably want to do this as well as give the item, give the bundle, all that sort of stuff. As well, if I was you, if you were going to go down this route of having things given to the player whenever leaderboards reset, normally you want the player on the next time they log in through the game, when a leaderboard has reset, you probably want to display that to them. You want to say, yes, the season's finished, this was your rank, here is your prize. Get them to confirm it, especially on mobile. This is, you want to do this because mobile, is a lot more compact, probably, to say the word. People can miss it if you don't show them to it. They might miss the fact that there is something in their inventory or armory that's waiting for them to to be given to them. Or if you give them a bundle and it's automatically unpacked on the back end and you don't show anything to them, they might miss the fact that actually they have been given the reward that they got for finishing in the leaderboard at a certain position. So you probably always want to make sure that you show people exactly what they have won, where they came in the leaderboard, and that it has reset and now it's going again. Especially on mobile, guys. Yeah, PC you can do this as well. But again, you have a lot more space on a UI screen on PC to be able to actually display things better. Like a little notification icon for an inventory system or something like that will actually be a lot more visible on PC compared to mobile, so you might get away with it. However, you probably want to get into the practice of whenever they next log in after the leaderboard's been done, give them information, give them a UI that says where they've come, all that sort of stuff that we just covered. And with that, then you should hopefully, you won't get complaints about, I didn't receive this prize at leaderboard, having to go through all the system, make sure they did actually get the reward that that they were supposed to have got, which can take a bit of time. And also as well, it takes a bit, if you're a small company or a small team, this can actually take a bit of time away from your dev time, because obviously someone's going to have to go through who knows all of this code in order to make sure that it actually happened. Whereas if you have all of the stuff given to the player in forms of UI, hopefully, unless something really weird happens, hopefully they should actually receive all of that information, and they should go, oh, okay, I came here, this is what I got, this is what happened next, yada yada yada, and it should all go fine. So I'm going to now go into the engine, and we're going to have a look at some of the different things that you can do with leaderboards through the API. Obviously, you can call these through the cloud script as well. It might be a little bit safer to do so, especially when giving them certain items or prizes. You probably want to always make sure that it goes through cloud script rather than through the client. But it's a little bit easier to show you guys through the visual side of things through the engine, rather than writing out a little bit of code for it. Again, you can probably look at this up online if you wanted to write the specific code for this, but I'm just going to show you what you can do. So if we search for leaderboards, there is actually quite a lot of different things you can do. I'm just going to look at the client ones for now. So you can get the character leaderboard. Each time that you request a leaderboard, you need to pass through the statistic name. Again, this is where that naming convention for the leaderboard or statistic needs to be pretty accurate to what you're doing, because you're going to have to pass it through. So you need to make sure that it at least, it's at least generic to whatever you're going to be doing, or don't call it something like I did, like test. That's not going to help. The player is going to, well, not the player, but you guys are going to have to make sure that if they click on something, it passes through test as a leaderboard, and then you might not be 100% sure what it's actually showing. You kind of want to make sure that you got your statistic name right. So you can get the character leaderboard. This just retrieves the leaderboard around the statistic. You can get leaderboard around character. So this is more, it gives you a list of ranked characters for the statistics centered on the requested character ID. Sorry. So this is more like if you want to show like a snippet of a leaderboard. So that you can see who's around you, sort of thing. Again with the leaderboard, get leaderboard for user characters. This is, it all depends on what you're doing with your game. If you're having title stuff like title users, or if you're having publisher users. I'm just going to stick to the title ones for now because it's a lot simpler to do. But characters is referring to the title specific character. The user characters, as this one is more for a little bit global, but so you probably want to use just the get character leaderboard or the get leaderboards around character, and then leave this one for now. Again, the leaderboards, like using it in this way, every project I've worked on hasn't used leaderboards to their fullest extent. you know, we have statistics, but we don't really keep track of the leaderboard side of things. We never really planned on resetting them. So, you know, they've all been set to manual and we haven't had to visually show leaderboards in a game. However, the system is pretty good for that because as I've just said, you can, you know, you can get not only the leaderboard itself, but also leaderboards around your character. And with the player data management, you can actually get like your friends leaderboard. So the friends that is automatically connected through Playfab through Steam. So basically, all of your Steam friends that own the game are automatically sent to to Playfab as well. And then you can get leaderboards for your friends. So this is like a specific, you know, like say like Call of Duty style when you can look at global leaderboards, or you can actually just look at your friends' leaderboards and see how you're doing against your friends. Playfab already has the support for this, so you don't need to worry about doing it yourself. And you can also get friend leaderboard around player. So again, this gets the leaderboard. If you've got a lot of friends, this gets the snippet of the leaderboard around yourself to see how you're doing around your local friends, as well as, you know, you could probably display the top one or top three or something, depending on how many friends you have, to show them the top as well. You can also just get leaderboard. This is pretty similar to character, but again, characters is more basically characters, guys, is if you're making like an MMO game, you know, or an RPG game where you have different characters for the player to make or choose, and then obviously they save that sort of thing to Playfab as that character. It can get a little bit confusing, and you can probably see that I've already got a little bit confused myself in how to describe this, but an RPG style of game where you're role playing and you create a character, that is then linked to Playfab if you set it up correctly to be able to save all the character's details. Now obviously each character is going to have its own leaderboard stuff, its own data, its own statistics, so then you can then show the leaderboards of the specific character that the player is currently playing. Whereas get leaderboard will just show the leaderboard for a given statistic. Whereas the character one requires normally the character ID as well. So it requires, you know, the character that the player is currently playing in order to look at it. So you probably want to just stay around the player data management for now. So you get your friend stuff and you get the generic leaderboard stuff. Of course, you can also do this on the server side of things, and this is probably again better done on the cloud script side of things, but I'll just show you a basic. We'll just get leaderboard in order to look at it. So let's just create a custom event and call that leaderboard. Let's create the request, and then here you can see you have max result count. So again, it defaults to 10. Be careful with the defaults that sometimes happen within UE, because UE requires you to have something in this normally for an int, and because it says 0, it will default to 0 because it's an actual value. Inside of CloudScript, it will just default to 10. That will work fine because it doesn't require it to be an actual valid number, whereas the Unreal Engine says, you know, you might have defaulted this to 10, but because there's nothing actually in here, it's invalid. So make sure that you set it to 10. Again, you can only set a maximum of 100 as well. You know, you probably aren't going to want to show more than 100 per screen anyway, because otherwise the player's just going to be bombarded with information that they don't need. Player constraints. Now, for now, you probably just want to ignore this. There's a little bit more information on there. For API calls from the client, only allow client to be able to request properties from the title made request. Just ignore this for now, unless you're a little bit further ahead and you understand exactly what is needed here, but sometimes you don't need this sort of thing. Start position, the position the leaderboard start the listings from. This defaults to 0, i.e. the first one. If you could probably get the leaderboard position of the player and then, you know, pass it through to start the position there if you wanted to show it by default, but most of the time you normally see games show the top 100 as the default, and then right at the very bottom or at the very top they show you your player with your positioning as like a separate little bit of UI. I'm just going to leave this as 0 now, just so that we get the leaderboard from you know, from the start, but you can do this if you need to. Statistic name, again, make sure that you've called it properly so that you know what you're calling. Use specific version. Now you can, if you tick this, then you're going to be looking for a specific version of the statistic leaderboards value that is done through the resetting. So by default, it'll automatically use the latest version, the one that's currently live. Most of the time, this is probably what you're going to want. However, if something is important for you guys to be able to show the leaderboards of a past event to the player, you don't want to go through miles and miles of past events of players, but you probably want to show them the event that's just finished. And obviously, if the events are rolling, so as in if one stops and one starts, you want to be able to show them the leaderboards for that have just gone, that have just ended, even though the new one has started. So that is probably the only point that you would say, okay, I want to use a specific version, and actually put in the version number, basically, that you want to show. Again, this is probably useful if you want to show the history of the event that just finished. Or, when you show them the UI for the prize they've got, show them a little snippet of the leaderboard around their player to see how they did, and then show them the top player or something like that, because people are usually interested as well in the top player's results. They want to see like how close they were to get into the next prize up, or how well the very top players did at this sort of thing. So this is is useful there, where you give them a reward, but then you also show them exactly where they finished and what they finished with, and what people around them finished with, what the next tier up was, and what the top player was. So you guys can decide on what you need to do for that. So if we just drag off our custom events for failure and success, failed leaderboards. It doesn't matter too much that I've spelt it wrong. And then success, leaderboard. There we go. And in the results, again, just break this down. This will have the leaderboards, again, as a JSON. It'll have the next reset, so the time the next reset occurs. This only happens if it is if it's done, so like each month or each day or something. If it's set to manual, this will just return null. This is basically for if you're showing the current live status of the leaderboard. You could put a timer that says like, leaderboard resets or season ends or something like that in X amount of days, weeks, whatever. But if you're doing it manually, it'll just have null. And then the version, this is only specific again if you're calling the specific version to double check that the version number is equal to the results that you're actually getting. The most important thing that we want here though is actually the leaderboard. So this is ordered listing of users and their position in the requested leaderboard. So, pretty self-explanatory. You can easily just for each loop this and then get the information from here. So within each one of these JSON files that you get back from each of the leaderboard through the array, each of these has the following. You have display name, the Playfab ID, the position that they came in, the profile. The profile is more for like if you want to show the profile of the player for some reason, and the stat value. So what they finished with, i.e. the value that the statistic was. All you need to do in order to get all of these again is just do field. Most of them are most likely string. I mean, position and start value are number. The profile is none of them. The profile is going to be an object. The player profile. Probably you don't really want to share this too much, because otherwise then people are going to be able to see the other people's profiles. The most important thing that people care about when looking at a leaderboard is the name of the person that got it, so the display name, the Playfab ID that's being shown. The Playfab ID is a little bit easier to use. Not so much, you don't really want to display this, but with basically if you haven't set up display name will come back null or empty. And because we're using Steam, you can get the Steam account information through Playfab with the Playfab ID. Therefore you can show the Steam name of the player if you want to just keep everything on Steam. Like if it's just going to be a single platform game and it's on Steam, you probably just want to use the Steam name for players in order to show off where they came on the leaderboard. Again, the display name will come back as null, but the Steam the Playfab ID can be used in order to get the Steam information linked to the account. They only care about the position that they came and the stat value that they got. And that's pretty much it. All you need to do in order to get these is just to get the field, put in either display name, Playfab ID, position, or stat value. So if we put in like position, and then do as well the stat value, the position and stat value are numbers, so you just do it like as number, or if it was display name or Playfab ID, you put it as string, and then you do whatever you wanted with these. You would hook them up into a UI sort of thing. So this is just the Playfab side of things. Once you have the leaderboard here, all you need to do then is hook up your systems to this. So you'd put this inside of a UI call where you'd show the leaderboard. You'd go through each of the leaderboard entries. You'd hook up the name, the position, the stat value. If this was a live version, obviously, you could make sure that it updates every minute. Obviously, try and keep things to update constantly, because obviously then it's going to be a drain on the API system of Playfab, and then they'll throttle the API calls that the player can make. But if you do it every minute, it should be fine. You don't really need to do this anyway. Don't go crazy on it, but some of the players won't be like, oh, this didn't update the second I know my friend finished a game and his score went up and he should have moved up in the leaderboards, because otherwise then if you're checking it every second, again they're just going to throttle the amount that you can make API calls with. Whereas if you update it every minute or every 5 minutes or something, if for some reason that player still has the screen on for the next 5 minutes, at least then it's not going to drag the system down on API calls, but it will update for the player. You could probably even cut this down to 30 seconds. I mean, some of the matchmaking stuff tells you to do it every 10 seconds or even less. Obviously, trying to keep it to a maximum of 10 per minute. But, if you only do it every 30 seconds, that's not a lot of time. But you'll update it every 30 seconds and players will be able to see things actually change as it goes. So then, all you need to do is call your update in your UI screens and it will update all the statistic values. Of course, you always want to get the new leaderboard because positions will have changed. But once you have that, you have all of this system, then you can hook up the leaderboard to your UI using Playfab leaderboards as a way to do it. If you want to show a past leaderboard, just remember to always put in the specific version. But if not, this will just show the live one. And then if you wanted to do the get friend, I'll just put in leaderboard. So, you could always do the friend leaderboard system that I was talking about. This will just use your friends that currently play your title data. So if I just go to players on here and search up here, I seriously doubt I have any friends on here because obviously this is just a test one. But it will automatically load. Yeah, so I don't have any in here, but as soon as any of your Steam friends play the game and they have an account on Playfab, it will then automatically add them to the Steam to the friends list, sorry. And then with that you'll be able to call the get friend leaderboards and get around. So you'll be able to check out how you're doing against your friends. And again, this is a very similar setup. It would be exactly the same as all of these. All you'd need to do is make sure that in your UI you have a tab maybe where you can select friend and global and do that sort of thing so that the people don't get confused. The only difference here is that you can include Facebook friends. Default is true. Again, with it being Unreal Engine, it automatically sets it to false when making a struct. So it won't return these, but unless your game's using Facebook, you probably don't want to. Or if you're going to use this, make sure you tick it. Steam is probably the one that you guys are going to mostly likely be using, as that is what this tutorial series is aimed around. And then these here are pretty much exactly the same. You have the max results, start position, statistic name, specific version. The only difference is the Xbox config. Unless you guys are making Xbox games, you probably want to just ignore this anyway, but it's just the token that's needed for Xbox. But this will come back with exactly the same stuff. So on the success node, you'll see that it has exactly the same. It has leaderboards, the next reset, the version, and then ignoring the request. So all you need to do then is select which one it's using. you probably want to create a function inside of your UI to just update the leaderboards by passing through an array of JSONs. And then all you need to do is call the UI function here and here, and then you don't even need multiple functions, and it'll just update with whatever leaderboard you pass through. And that's a way for you guys to show off very quick and easy leaderboards into your game through the Playfab system, and you don't have to worry too much about the actual leaderboard side of things, the back end of the leaderboard. Now, you could go crazy and create your own leaderboards. I've seen people do this, or you could use the Steam leaderboards, but they're not great. This Playfab automatically has all of these systems in place for you guys in order to use anyway. So if you're watching this, you probably want to learn how to do this anyway. This is exactly how you do it. You set up the statistic as the leaderboard. You can then set the data for the leaderboard. You can call functions inside of CloudScript to make sure that it has a default value and that you can return. You can get or set any of the statistics that the player needs. And then inside of the engine, you have all of this API that's similar to CloudScript anyway, to be able to get the leaderboards and get friend leaderboards or around the player anyway, and be able to show them all to the player. Again, you can do all of this inside of Playfab and simply have it return just the leaderboard JSON object array. If you wanted to not have any of this inside of it anyway. However, somebody could manipulate this leaderboard data in the client side and change it to show that they're first or something, or show that they got a higher value. However, the leaderboard actual resets and the prizes and stuff that are given to players through Playfab are done on Playfab servers. They're done without even touching the client. It only cares about the Playfab ID. Therefore, you won't even have to worry about players trying to hack the system, because you can just look at it and literally, it won't update it on their end. It won't update it on Playfab because the leaderboard will have already been reset by you. So you'll be able to just literally look at the past leaderboard and just be like, you finished here. This was your score. Obviously, you're trying to hack the system and say that you got a higher place for a different reward. This is exactly what you got. And just by simply downloading these logs here, you can see the player ID and the value. So, sure, you might want to keep the leaderboards in the client side of things, in actually just doing the API calls, because all of the stuff that's actually important to do with it, in the sense of giving the prizes out to players, it's all handled by Playfab already on their servers. So again, I would recommend doing everything inside of CloudScript anyway. It's just a lot safer, and as long as you guys have set it up properly in order to do verification through server stuff, then you're going to have a much easier time preventing things like hacking anyway, because everything's going to be handled by Playfab on their CloudScript in their servers, rather than everything on client where somebody could just call set statistic and update it to be a randomly high value anyway. So just by having some sort of authentication inside of the CloudScript in order to say it's coming from a server, nobody's hacking this, this is the correct data, all that sort of stuff, you should be able to prevent all of this happening anyway. But as well as that, all of the prize stuff is handled by Playfab server in the back end anyway, so you're not even going to have to worry about that too much. Now, I've rambled on a little bit because I'm just trying to make sure that this episode is covered quite clearly. It sounds simple whenever you talk about player statistics and leaderboards, but I just wanted to make sure that you guys understood the leaderboard side of things. They come hand in hand, statistics and leaderboards. So if you have a leaderboard, the player can set the statistic, and all you need to do in order to call the statistic is, in order to set the statistic anyway, is simply just do statistic, and then it looks like I've already created a function actually for it from when I did it the last time. All you need to do then is just execute the CloudScript that you can create very simply just by setting it. It looks like what I've done. Let's just double check that that's actually in there, because that would be really handy. But all you guys need to do is just call set statistic, update the value, and there you go. And if it's getting statistic, all you need to do is get a statistic and then read the value. So I do actually have the function in here from last time I had it, from before the video before, where unfortunately it's got lost. But all we do here is pass through the argument of the test statistic that we want the player to be able to set. All we're doing here is passing through the new amount. Then we're creating the request with the test wins and the new amount, and then we're setting it. Very simple, you know. Each player can just call this individually, and then it'll just set a statistic for them, just exactly the same as you'd set player data. So I think that covers pretty much everything on statistics and leaderboards. It is a very simple system to use. You know, all you need to do is create the leaderboard, and then from there the player can call any of the statistics of leaderboards that they can have. You know, you can reset them, you can set up all the reward stuff, you can easily show them in engine, in the game, in the form of tables and stuff, or UIs. We've just covered that. It's very simple to do. And that, you know, it's a very simple system, but it's quite powerful. You know, being able to automatically create their own leaderboards that the player wants is pretty cool. So I'm going to leave you guys with it for today. The plugin stuff should hopefully be out this week, the week of this video going out on the Monday. I'm hoping to get it out on the Tuesday or Wednesday. It has been delayed a little due to some Epic issues and some other issues that I've had to sort out as well. But I've made the video for it. It's, you know, it's a very simple plugin to use. It'll come with a couple of example callbacks, and it will also contain the microtransaction callback for you guys. It will be free to use, free to download through Epic, and hopefully it should be out soon. So I think that's all for today, guys, and I'll see you later. Bye!